Okay, well, we're making a chili just in time for the Super Bowl this weekend. It's not your average chili, and that's why I'm making it. I'm Judy Matusky, and I'm a registered dietitian and licensed nutritionist, as well as a culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. And today it's all about chili, so let's get started. We call our weekly recipes one simple recipe. This one's one simple-ish recipe. It's a little bit more involved and a little more ingredients than what I would normally bring you. But this year, there might be a few of these like this that I'm going to bring that's just kind of gets out of our little box of few ingredients and fast cooking because they're worth it. This is a recipe that I found from Molly Baz, who has several cookbooks, and I follow her quite frequently. She tends to cook a little bit richer than the way I would cook, and sometimes a little bit more involved and more complicated. But I do love some of her recipes, and this is one of them, and we'll talk about how I kind of tweaked it. So when I'm looking at recipes, I follow so many different chefs and so many different people, and I'm always trying to pull recipes out that I think that can be modified and tweaked to make them just healthier, more in line with the type of cooking and eating that I like to do and the recipes I'd like to bring you. And just able to make the tweaks without really compromising the flavor too much. So we'll talk a little bit about how I might have done that so that helps you along the way. And we are also you're going to find that there's really some really different ingredients in this recipe. That's what I loved about it. I like chili, but it's not my all-time favorite flavor combinations for me. I love this one because this actually kind of has more of a Middle Eastern flair to it, and I love those seasoning combinations. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to get my pan. I have a Dutch oven here, and I did do a couple of steps ahead, of course, because you kind of need to do that when we're trying to get in and out with these videos. All right, so I'm going to get this going. Couple things. I'm going to start browning off the meat, and the one thing that this is not a vegetarian recipe. We'll talk about how maybe we can make it that way if you'd want to. I haven't done that yet, but I'd love to try. I'm using ground turkey, not ground turkey breast, just ground turkey. You need a little bit of fat in here. And I was really doing the comparisons, and I'm going to get some oil in here, and we'll talk about that nutritionally. All right, so probably because this is relatively low fat when it comes to the ground turkey. I am going to add maybe 2 tablespoons of olive oil in here. And we'll talk about, how you're swapping out. I'm just going to use my hands. Now, what Molly did, which I thought was a brilliant idea, is this is about 1.5 pounds of ground turkey. The recipe, I think, originally called for 2 pounds, but I get these packets from Costco and they're 1.5 pounds. So I didn't want to open up another one, so I'm just doing 1.5 pounds. So what I'm doing is I cut back a little bit on the amount of meat I'm using, but I up the beans, which is actually even healthier and even better. All right, so what she did was, and let me just wash my hands. What I loved about this recipe is that instead of breaking up the meat right away as you're trying to brown it, she just broke this into 4 big kind of shaggy patties, and then you put them right into the heat. And what I loved about this idea is that you can really get some better browning on it. I feel like when you break it up and you're trying to brown something like a ground turkey, or even ground beef, which has a lot of moisture in it, it ends up kind of steaming more than it browns. So this was a way to kind of up the browning possibility. So and then we'll break it up later. So I'm just going to let it in there, and it's going to sizzle away for a little bit, and then we'll flip it. We're going to do a couple of steps while that's doing this. Just a couple of pointers about this recipe. This is a recipe where you're going to want to read through the recipe ahead of time so that you get an idea of what the steps are. And that's true for any recipe. Just read your recipe, really know where the recipe's going so that you're really prepared for what's coming next. The other thing is that whole idea of mise en place. So when you have a recipe that has just a few more ingredients than maybe what you're used to cooking with, maybe a few more steps, have everything ready ahead of time. I do this for these videos, but I do it when I'm cooking anyway. Every time I cook, I get everything out. I kind of put it out on my counter. I have what I need so that when I'm cooking, I'm not running to the pantry, running to the refrigerator, trying to get things that I forgot. I usually get everything out. I don't always measure everything ahead of time, but at least I have it all in place. And when I can, I might do some chopping if I needed to ahead of time, which is what I did for this recipe. So just to give us a little bit of a head start, you know, I basically, you know, what I didn't season these these little turkey balls here. I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit of salt or a little bit of pepper right now, and then we might just add more as we go. But let's, as this going, I did want to talk a little bit about the difference. So, you know, that when I'm doing these videos, what I love to do is not only kind of show you some easy ways to make some really healthy but delicious food, but also talk a little bit nutritionally, you know, little tips in between. And I think when it comes to using ground beef versus ground turkey versus ground pork, they are kind of all over the map when it comes to, and the main difference here is not the protein content. The protein content is the same ounce for ounce for all of those. It really has to do nutritionally and from a heart healthy perspective and just overall, just decreasing, you know, overall chronic disease risk, because we really all should be lowering our saturated fat content. Not necessarily our total fat, but more our saturated fat. And whenever you can do that, it's a really good swap. So when you're using ground beef, if you go like 90% lean ground beef, you're going to pick up, you know, maybe 4 or 5 grams of saturated fat in a serving, a cooked serving. And you think, oh, that doesn't sound like very much. Well, really in a heart-healthy eating plan, we're trying to maybe get 12 grams of saturated fat or less per day. So when you start getting as something that has 4 or 5 grams in one serving, that's getting close to half your day, right there. So the turkey is going to save you a couple of grams of saturated fat. Not a lot lower than lean ground beef, so if you wanted to do the lean ground beef, you could, but certainly a little lower. And when we can save a couple of grams of saturated fat anywhere we can, I think that's a great idea, because we don't really want very much in our diet. We don't even need it in our diet. Our body will make the saturated fat that it needs. We don't need to eat it at all. But if we are eating, you know, anything with fat in it, you're going to pick up some saturated fat. It's in plant foods and it's also in animal. Now, when you start getting up to that higher percentage of fat in ground beef, like 85% or 80%, there's where you're really starting to pick up a lot of saturated fat. It can get as high as 9 grams in a 4-ounce cooked serving. That's a lot. That's a lot. Some of you only need 10 max, 12 max. So that's where, when you can make little shifts around your recipe ingredients, that's where that's what I try to do when I'm bringing you these recipes. I think ground turkey breast would be too lean. I think that would be a little hard to do because I think it would get a little too dry. But to compensate for the little bit less fat in the regular ground turkey, what I'm doing is using the olive oil, because that's an unsaturated fat. So this is fat, but a healthier fat. So I'll add a little bit more of that to compensate so that everything's not, you know, too dry. All right. So we have these browning. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. Now, normally, when your meat is ready to flip, it should just kind of release from the bottom of the pan. Pretty easily. I'm probably jumping ahead here. I probably could let this go a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead. It is browning, and I'll show it to you. I'll pull it off and show it to you here in a sec. It is getting browning. You can smell it browning. All right, let me get that flipped. All right. I'm going to rinse off my hands, and I'm going to rinse off my spatula here. All right, so let me pull this over. It's not too hot. They're starting to brown. I'm getting some browning on there, so I'm going to kind of keep that going. I have my kind of medium-high heat here, so I'm going to brown that off. Now, this is a recipe that's kind of in 3 steps. So we're going to make the chili, and then we're going to embellish the chili, and that's what really elevates the flavor of this recipe. So we're making a quick little pickled or marinated red onion. And then we're also going to make this incredible flavor bomb at the end. And that is what makes this chili. All right. So the recipe calls for 2 full red onions. I went ahead and chopped 1.5 of those red onions. The recipe, calls for doing this in the food processor. You can go one of 2 ways. You can do your onion and your garlic and your ginger in the food processor and really break it down. I just didn't feel like cleaning my food processor. I don't mind chopping. The only thing with the onions is because it's quite a bit of onion in this, I was really had to get the tissues out because these red onions were a little bit strong. If you're doing it in your food processor, you know, you'll save your eyes a little bit, but I was like, just didn't want to do that. So I have half of this red onion. I left the root at the end just to hold it together. I'm just gonna, I think for this, I might just cut this in half. And then I'm just going to slice through it. So we're just going to get little thin slices. This is what we're going to use to make a little quick pickle, pickled onion, or, you know, kind of more marinated because it's not going to marinate that long. All right, so thin slices. I do this all the time. Whenever I have any onions, extra onions, even cabbage. I do this with a lot of jalapeno peppers because my husband grows a lot of those in the garden in the summer, and I always have so many extra. So, but particularly pickled, when you do a quick little pickle like this and you just keep it in your fridge, it's such a great little condiment to add on everything. Sandwiches, pasta, rice, whatever you're really making. I think we're down to the end. I just love it. I just put it in a jar with a lid and let it in there and keep it in its little vinegar pickling juice, and it is ready for me whenever I need it. So I do that a lot. I always have cabbage, red onion, pepper, jalapeno peppers that are always in my fridge. All right, so we've got the onion. Now this recipe calls for, we're going to use this apple cider vinegar later, and that's another nice thing about this. And when you're looking at recipes, it's kind of using like one ingredient a couple of times in the recipe. That's what this recipe is doing. So we're using the red onion not only in our chili, but we're going to use the red onion as a pickle. So two different ways, all right? So we're going to use the apple cider vinegar in the chili, but because I'm going to do this pickling, rather than using a white vinegar and getting that out of the pantry, this is finished. Since I have already have the apple cider vinegar out, I'm just going to use that. Normally when I pickle, I use a white vinegar just because it really doesn't have any flavor at all, which is great for pickling. So I don't know, just enough to get, there's not even a measurement for this. It's really just kind of enough to get you don't have to submerge it, but just to bring it up maybe 3/4 of the way, whatever the bowl is. And then we're just going to add a couple pinches of sugar just to offset the acidity from the vinegar. And then maybe, you know, a teaspoon of kosher salt. And sprinkle that over. And that's about it. So here's our little quick pickle. And just, you know, mix that around. And again, like I said, you can do this with cabbage. You can do this with other onions. You can do this with the jalapeno peppers. I just love having pickled onions around. They're just so good. They just add such a great flavor to things. All right. I'm going to sit this aside. Normally I would just put this in the refrigerator, but I'm just going to let it sit here on the counter. Well, let it do its thing. And then these will all start to break down a little bit, and then they'll end up being covered by the vinegar. But let me put that aside. So that's that. And now that our meat is probably ready, I'm going to go ahead and take it out right now. I'm going to put it on a separate plate. It hasn't cooked all the way through, but that's okay. We just wanted to start that browning process, which is what we've got. That's just going to add some flavor to our chili because we want this brown bits here at the bottom of the pan for sure, because that's going to really bring flavor. All right, we're going to sit this aside. We're going to break that up later on. All right, so now I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit. I'm going to add just a little bit more olive oil, maybe a tablespoon or so to there. And now we're going to get our onions going. So this is the 1.5 red onions that I had already pre-chopped. Like I said, I kind of saved you from crying on camera because they were strong onions. Normally red onions are a little more mild. I don't usually have that problem, but maybe because I was chopping, you know, two big ones or 1.5. All right, so I'm going to get these in here. I'm just going to stir it around. I'm going to let the moisture from the onions kind of almost deglaze the pan at least a little bit. We'll finish deglazing it later. It won't continue to burn or anything because these onions are at the bottom. But it'll bring up a little bit of the ground turkey that really browned. So this is going to just stay in here. I don't know. I kind of rush in this a little bit. It's maybe 5 minutes. That's probably what I'll be doing. But if you wanted to do it a little longer, that's kind. We're not really trying to brown the onions as much as we're just kind of sweating them down a little bit. So why don't we go ahead? I'm gonna let that go. And then what I did was the next thing we're going to be adding will be some ginger and some garlic. So it was a pretty decent size. I think Molly's recipe says about a 3-inch piece of ginger. Like I said, I usually keep my ginger sliced and in white wine in my refrigerator. So I'm down to 1 piece. I'll have to get a little bit more. But I used about 2 pieces. And then because it was just easier than to chop, I felt like at least I'll get my microplane out. I don't mind washing that as opposed to the food processor. So I did microplane the ginger through that just to really mince it finely. And then because I had the microplane out, I was doing 4 cloves of garlic. You could do more. I don't think I would do less, but you could do more garlic. I think Molly might have used a whole head of garlic. That's a little much for me. But if you'd want to do that, you could. I mean, if you love your garlic, go ahead, by all means. We know how good garlic is for us, so the more we have, the better. That allium family. So we've got a lot of onions, a lot of garlic in this recipe, which again, is that allium family with Allison is just one of those kind of protective compounds, right, that really helps ourselves out a little bit, all right, from inflammation. All right, so it's cleaning up, and I think that's another good idea is to sort of clean as you go. That makes it a little easier so your things aren't so messy. So I have my cutting board cleaned off, and these onions are just doing their thing. I turned up a little bit. They're breaking down. And because they're so finely chopped, they're going to break down pretty quickly. If you did do this all in the food processor, it'll really break down pretty fast, but they still need a few more minutes, so we'll let them go. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is just walk through the seasonings, the spices that we're going to use, at least some of them. And there are quite a few, but again, I think you'll have all of these in your pantry most likely, with the exception of maybe one, and we'll talk about, and that is the star ingredient in this recipe. So you will need to go get that. All right, so we're going to start with some cumin, which again, cumin, most of us have it in our pantry. I have to look at the amounts. Okay, the cumin is 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to go ahead and just put this all in a bowl, just because sometimes it's easier just to get all your spices in one little bowl and then dump them all in together when you're ready. Or you could certainly just add it directly. But since I'm letting this go, we're going to walk through it, the spices. And now we're going to do 2 teaspoons of coriander. Now, again, Molly's recipe, she likes to use whole coriander and whole cumin seeds, the actual seeds, and then she does a mortar and pestle and breaks them down. Yes. Is that a better flavor? Yes. They say fresher when they're whole. Once you start grinding anything, then, you release the oils, and they will break down in your pantry and it'll lose their flavor more quickly. So if you like to cook with whole spices, great. I do sometimes, but in something like this, I'm going to go ahead and just use the ground. So we have our cumin and our coriander, and I think it's a teaspoon of turmeric. So we'll give that in, that nice, it's got that gorgeous color. That's what I love about spices. They're just, the colors and the hues are so beautiful. All right, so those are the 3 main ones. Now let's talk about the star ingredient. And the star ingredient here is dried mint. All right, so dried mint. I know I have fresh mint too here off to the side because I was using fresh mint for something else this week, which I love, fresh mint. Usually we have it in our garden all summer long into the fall, but right now it's winter, so we don't. But dried mint, fresh mint, I'll probably use that at the end when I'm serving this. I'll just sprinkle it with some fresh mint. But dried mint is a whole nother thing. So fresh and dried mint taste so much different to me, and I think to anybody. They're really a very different flavor profile. And I feel like dried mint is an underused ingredient. We should be using it in more things. It just adds this incredible flavor. I don't even know. I mean, it is minty, but not in a strong mint flavor. I feel like when you're using fresh mint, it's a pretty strong minty flavor. This is not, and I love it. So we're going to use, in this spice blend, we're using 2 tablespoons of dried mint. And then we're going to do something with this dried mint at the end, which is what I consider the flavor bomb and what really is an incredible addition to the chili. So dried mint, this might be something you might have to pick up. In the summer when I'm growing mint, and if you're growing mint, maybe you do the same thing. I just let it dry. I dried it in my microwave, or if I put it in the oven. Then I'll just crush it up and make my own dried mint. But I did do that. I used it up. I don't have any, so I had to buy that from the store. All right, so these are, the onions look great. All right, so now I think the next step is to add the garlic and the ginger that we microplaned or finely chopped, or if you wanted to pull out your food processor, by all means. All right, we're gonna give this maybe just a minute, 30 seconds or so. I'm gonna mix this all in together. All right, and it smells really good. I mean, we're bringing up, all right, I'll show it to you, because I know it's so hard. It's so hard for this camera angle. I probably need one that should come down over the top to make it, let me just grab this. I can pull it off for you. All right. So there it is. As you can see, there's some browning at the bottom, and it's really, this did break down pretty well. All right, so we're gonna throw the garlic and the ginger in there a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead. I think the next step is to add our seasonings. So they're all ready to go in. And this little step kind of helps to bloom the spices, as they say. So when you're just adding them to your onion and a little bit of oil that's in here from sauteing the onions, this really does help to bring out the flavor and the intense. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Rather than just adding them to the liquid. This is a great step to do whenever you're cooking. All right, so we're going to let that go again, 30 seconds or so, get these going. And now we're going to add an ingredient. It's called harissa. I love it. Now, this can be a very spicy addition, depending on the brand of harissa that you get. I like to buy the mild version of it. This is their spicy version, but typically I would do mild because sometimes it's just too spicy, and I really want the flavor. It's kind of roasted peppers. It's like a pepper sauce that is a little spicy traditionally. Like I said, I usually buy I think it's the Mina brand, and you can get mild or spicy. I just don't usually get the spicy because it's pretty spicy for me. But anyway, you got to taste it. So this calls for 1/4 of a cup. I wouldn't use 1/4 of a cup if you don't want it to be too spicy and you have a very spicy brand. Maybe a tablespoon or 2. So just keep an eye. You might have to adjust for that. All right, so we have that in. And then again, this is just going to saute again, another 30 seconds or so. Just kind of bringing all of these flavors together. We want them kind of coming together over the heat. So we have that in here. Now we're going to just add the meat back in. So I'm just going to bring these over here, the ground turkey meatballs in a sense. I'm just going to I'm not going to add the juices in there. Wash my hands. All right. And then what you're going to want to do is break this up. So now this is the time to break up the browned turkey little meatballs that we made, or meat patties. So we're going to break that up just like you would with chili. You just want to break it into the little crumbles. And we'll mix that all around. And then that just kind of comes together right with all those spices and the garlic and the ginger and the onions. Again, a little different flavor combination. You can see, right? Let me just use a different, my wooden spoon. All right. A little different flavor combination than a traditional chili. And I just love that. I love it. So I'm hoping that you will too. All right, so we got this in. Now that that's all together, and let me show it to you. So we have the ground meat, the ground turkey mixed in with all of the onions and all of the spices. It has a little bit of a yellow hue to it from the turmeric. All right. I'm gonna set these to the side here, and now we're just adding the final ingredients. So I think when you're making chili, it's not that much different. I mean, chili does have a fairly long list of ingredients. Nothing that's difficult. Most of us have these things in our pantry, where this one, maybe not the harissa and maybe not the dried mint. Those are the two that you may not have. All right, so now we're going to add a little bit of, I was actually out of order. The recipe calls for a fourth of a cup of vinegar, of apple cider vinegar, and that's something I could have added even before I added the ground beef. The vinegar was just kind of to help bring up the bits that were at the bottom of the pan before the meat went in, but it had already kind of, there wasn't a whole lot left. It had already been lifted from just the vegetables that I put in. But the vinegar is really nice. It just, I don't know, it just adds, it doesn't get vinegary, but it adds a nice little background flavor in the chili. So that would have kind of helped to bring up some of the bits and pieces at the bottom, but I think we're looking pretty good there. All right, so we had the vinegar that we're adding, and now we're just gonna add everything else that we need. So we just need a can of tomatoes. It could be, this is a 14-ounce can of cherry tomatoes. I just happen to love these. I always have these in my pantry. I get them at our local Acme. You can't find them everywhere, but when I see them, I'm always grabbing them. So this is what I have. You could just use regular crushed tomatoes. That would be fine. Doesn't have to be the cherry. And you're gonna want the whole can and the juice for this. All right, now we're gonna add we are gonna add 3 cups of broth. This happens to be, I did make a chicken stock. I had it in my freezer. So this is just chicken broth that I'm gonna add. You could use vegetable broth. You could use, I don't know if I'd use beef broth, but probably chicken or vegetable. But you do need that. It doesn't have to be homemade. If you have it, great. If you don't, obviously just from a can or one of those kind of vacuum sealed packaging. So 3 cups is our liquid. And then we're gonna throw in just 2 final little seasonings. So we're adding 2 bay leaves. Again, most of you will probably have these. Throw them in. And then a real small cinnamon stick or half of a larger cinnamon stick. I just go easy on this because sometimes it can overpower the rest, the flavor. It gets too strong with cinnamon. So I like a real small one or just half of a large. Okay. And then the last thing, obviously, are going to be our beans, right? So this recipe, you can do any combination of beans you want. There's no limitation. This is not traditional, so you could use chickpeas, you could use pinto beans, you could use white beans, you could use kidney beans, you could use a mix of all of those beans. It's basically 3 15-ounce cans that are drained and rinsed. And because I had fairly large cans, I used a large can of cannellini or white beans, and then I used a large can of the kidney beans, and I want to talk about these in a minute. So I do have a few more beans here than what the recipe calls for, but I have a little less ground turkey. So I'm going to go ahead with the amount that I have. It's going to have a little more bean, but I like that. All right, so those I just used 2 different ones. We know that we're cooking a lot more with beans. Everybody needs to be. We're talking about lentils and beans and, all of the legumes. So the more, the better. That's what I love about this chili, or chili in general. Most chili, there are some that are made with just meat, which wouldn't prefer nutritionally. But anyway, so there's a lot of beans in here, and it's another great, delicious way to get your whole family, really embracing the beans. So this makes a nice, huge pot of jelly. Look at the size of that. Look how much it makes. It's amazing. All right, so that's got everything in here now. I think we got all the spices. We got our onions and our ginger and our garlic and a little bit of broth, and then all of those great spices and, a little bit of unusual, maybe vinegar isn't something you might typically add to your chili. So at this point, I am going to just cover it, maybe just a little ajar, and turn it down a little bit, and then let it simmer. Now this can simmer as long as you want it to simmer. I think Molly's recipe said 2 hours. I mean, you can simmer it as long as you want to simmer it. It doesn't have to be quite that long. I think that, you know, you could eat this in 30 minutes for sure if you're really were in a rush. The longer it cooks, just like any chili, it's going to get a little more flavorful. The meat gets a little more tender. It just, you know, all those flavors sort of marry together, and this will even be better tomorrow. So if you want to make this for the Super Bowl, maybe make it Saturday, then all you do is reheat it for the, you know, for the game, and you're ready to go. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about this final step. All right, so this does have a few more steps and a few more ingredients, but I think you would agree. It's not hard. There's nothing hard about this. It's pretty simple. It's not much different than just making regular chili. Only, to me, it's better because I like these flavor combinations. All right, now you can add, here's one thing I didn't add, because the last 2 times I made this, I didn't add the spinach. Now the recipe calls for frozen spinach, you could just throw the whole frozen spinach in there and let it, you know, defrost in the heat of the chili. You could defrost your spinach if you wanted to get some of the water out of it. I had a huge bag of fresh spinach, not baby spinach, but like really bigger leaf spinach that I prefer over the baby spinach when I can get it. I haven't added it and it's delicious without it, but then I thought, well, it seems silly not to add it from a nutritional perspective. Then we've got beans in here. We've got great plant protein. We've got some protein from the ground turkey, all those fabulous spices. Why not add our dark leafy greens to this? Because then it's all in one. And then you don't even have to add extra vegetables when you're serving this, because it'll already be in here. So this was a pretty big pack of of spinach. I may or may not add it all. Right now I'm probably going to only add about half of this, because you know how spinach, it just breaks down into nothing. So I may end up using it all. I'll just wait and see how this breaks down. So it is a nice little addition. So this is the first time I'm making it with the spinach. Typically, it wasn't only because I didn't have it, I think, when I was making it. So anyway, I love kidney beans. If you're not using them, these are a super high fiber, high protein bean. Higher than fiber than a lot of regular beans. I mean, all beans are great source of fiber, but kidney beans are even higher. And because of their color, you know, whenever vegetables have these beautiful hues, this red, there's interesting plant compounds that actually create the color within the vegetable, and that's really good for us because those are where our antioxidants live. So I think kidney beans kind of get forgotten. Right now, chickpeas get all the love. I would like to, you know, let's get some kidney beans back in. And since kidney beans are a little more traditional in chili, I thought it would be perfect. So anyway, all right, final step. I'm gonna move my chili off to my back burner right now so that we can do this final step. It's so simple. It's such a simple little thing to do, but what a flavor bomb. All right, chili's off to the back. I'm gonna bring this over here, turn this down a little bit. So you just need a little pan. And what we're gonna do is make mint oil. And we're gonna, we're using mint, the dried mint in 2 ways. Went into the chili, and now we're gonna make a mint oil. And we're gonna take about 1/3 cup of olive oil, and we're gonna add it to this skillet. And then we're gonna add the dried mint, and we're gonna basically sizzle. This is gonna take a little time because it doesn't come out very quickly. We're gonna sizzle the mint to turn it into this amazing, flavorful mint oil that we're gonna drizzle on top of the chili. All right, so I said this is kind of a 3-part chili. So we're making the chili as our base, right? We created this little pickle onion that didn't take long. We already had the onion anyway. We just chopped it down. We already were using the apple cider vinegar. We just added that with a little salt and just a dash of sugar just to cut the vinegar a little bit. And these are just, you can see, they're kind of break it down a little bit, and they're marinating. You put this in the fridge if you wanted to. I think I will now because this is going to take a little while to cook. So they could go in the refrigerator, but until you need them, because then they'll stay cold. All right, so we have our 1/3 cup of oil in the pan. And now we're gonna take our dried mint, and I think we're adding, what are we adding? 3 tablespoons of the dried mint. So we're using 5 tablespoons total. So we use 2 tablespoons of the dried mint in the chili. And now we're gonna use 3 tablespoons in our oil. So you kind of want to get the oil maybe medium heat, medium high, a little bit. We don't want to necessarily burn the dried mint, but we also want it to sizzle. So I could probably wait a little longer, but I'm going to go ahead and add it. So we're going to add 3 tablespoons. And whenever you sizzle herbs, whether they're fresh herbs like rosemary or thyme, or sage in olive oil, oh, it's the best. I mean, the smell is amazing. I loved fried or sizzled like fresh sage. Oh, the leaves are amazing. So you just, same thing we're doing. You get warm olive oil, you drop your sage leaves in. They only take a few seconds, basically. Once they stop kind of sizzling, you take them out, put them on a paper towel. They're like potato chips, like a little sprinkle of salt. They're like sage potato chips. They're so good, but they're great, obviously, on top of things as well. But anyway, so we're kind of doing the same thing, only instead of fresh, we're using dried mint. And just grab my spoon. And so it's just going in here. And right now the oil isn't quite hot enough. So ideally, what you'll want to do is you want to get your oil a little bit warmer, and then add your mint. I can hear it sizzling. I don't know if you can, because it is sizzling. So it's going to sizzle a little bit. So you do want to bring it to a sizzle. And then it takes maybe 90 seconds, a little over a minute, to really bring the flavor from out of the mint into the oil. And it just changes it completely. I just can't even tell you how different. You'd have to do it. You have to try it. Fresh mint versus dried mint, and then dried mint as a mint oil. So it's sizzling. You can see, I think you can see the bubbles. Now it's a little, you can hear it and sizzling. All right, so you want that to just sizzle away. And then as this is done, I'm gonna let it go a little bit. We don't want to burn it, so you just, keep an eye on it. I might even just turn it off at this point. You only need, it's probably a minute to a minute and a half that you're really going to sizzle this, but it's going to continue to sizzle even, because I'm going to keep it on the burner because that'll stay hot. And that's it. So and then when you go to plate the chili, which I don't think I'm going to do just because it's not quite ready. So you take your bowl of chili, and you saw the pictures on the recipe. So it's the bowl of chili. Then you're going to take I think you do it 3 layers. You can, if you're using yogurt, then this makes it look beautiful. So you have the chili, it's your dollop of yogurt, then it's your pickled onion, and then it's, a teaspoon or so of the drizzled mint oil over the top. Absolutely amazing. The flavors, just the spices in the chili, and then the pickled red onion, and the mint oil, and then the creamy, yogurt. It's this flavor bomb in your mouth. It's just unbelievable. And I fell in love with this recipe. As soon as I saw Molly making it, I said, that's the chili for me. And I just tweaked hers a little bit to make it just a little bit healthier in the sense of bringing down the saturated fat content. Other than that, I think I cut back a little bit on some of the seasonings, because the one thing you have to keep in mind too when you're cooking and you're trying to cook a little bit lighter is that because this recipe, and I knew that the chili that I was going to make just wasn't going to be as rich in oils and fats than the recipe Molly was making, because she was using a higher fat meat and a lot more and a little richer ingredients. And so when that happens, sometimes you have to scale back a little bit on the seasonings because they might overpower it. The more fat you have in a dish, the more seasonings it'll take, particularly salt. So high fat foods are usually high salt foods, because when you have more fat, you need more salt, or you just don't quite taste it the same. So nutritionally, that's not so great. So we don't always want more fat and more salt, right? So when you're cooking with less fat or lighter, you can pare back on some of those seasonings because you don't need quite as much. All right, which is what I did. So here's our mint oil. So you can see it, and you would just take this and you just kind of drizzle it all over the top. The mint and the mint oil. You use it all. That sizzled mint is going to go, as well as the oil, is going to go on top of your chili. So there's your layering. If I think of it, once this chili cooks a little bit longer, I always say I'm going to do this and I forget, but I'm going to put it, I'll assemble it in the bowl and then I'll just show it to you. But it is, you can see it on the picture of the recipe. All right, stay well. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with others. Again, a little bit longer, but not difficult. Make it on Saturday. You'll have it, make everything on Saturday and then you'll have it ready to go and just assemble it on Sunday. All right, stay well till next week. Bye-bye.